So this has turned into somewhat of a nightmare. I put my epoxy down, placed the board, and then realized the PCI lanes just weren't lining up good enough. So I ran in, grabbed the graphics card, tried to shove it in, and sure enough it was just a little bit off. And so I frantically started like cutting this stuff and trying to shift the board a little bit. I'm pulling this away so I can shift the board, and it just wasn't enough because of this tiny little spot sticking out right here in the corner. The motherboard's catching on that. So I either need to grind that off, cut that out, or I guess I could also trim up the motherboard. There's nothing going on in this corner. It would just be a tiny little, notch out of it. So that's where I'm at. I'm gonna wind up cutting this whole entire I/O out, and I'm gonna replace it. I'll just make a new one, but I'm kind of bummed. It's not exactly going as smooth as I had hoped, but that's why I'm doing it. So if anyone wants to do this in the future, they know all the bumps ahead of time. And I'm tired. I just woke up. Gotta go get some coffee. Okay, so here's my little SMT soldering station that I bought off Amazon, one of the cheapies, but they get good reviews, so I bought it. I've never done this before, but I am going to remove this PS2 keyboard and mouse deal because it's in the way of the GTX 1050 Ti. So I have no heat tape, so what I've done is just got some aluminum foil and kind of masked off the area, and then I'm going to take my heat gun and I'm going to blow this way so I can see the solder get soft and melt, and then I'm going to hopefully be able to just pull on this and yank it out. We'll see how it goes. I hope it works. Okay, so I tried my hot air solder station. I tried to heat up that back side of the solder and it would not melt. I was getting worried that I was heating it up too much. So then I got my soldering gun, or the gun part out, and or the iron, I mean, and tried to just melt the spots individually, and I turned it all the way up to like 400 degrees or a little over 400 degrees, and even the soldering iron wouldn't melt those spots. So I decided to manually remove it, and not too bad. A couple little scrapes here and there, little tiny cut in the PCB right there from my Dremel. But that's alright. I didn't damage anything. I had to do it. I needed space for this little card to sit in there. Ow. I should put something on there. It's pretty sharp. Oh well. Let's see the aftermath. Whatever. Whatever. I don't care if you guys don't care. It looks worse than it really was. I was careful with it, I promise. Alright, let's go see if we can fit this card in here. Alright, so this has been a real pain in the ass. I've basically had to chop the entire I/O panel out of there. So this is just like the little foil insulator thing. And there's the 1050 Ti locked in with a little deal. It's in the right spot. It's a little bit of a hack job. I'm gonna get a piece of plexiglass, I think, and make a I/O shield. Paint it all black. Try to clean it up. Seems like this whole thing could go over a little bit. There it is. 1050. And there's the i7 870. I still haven't glued it back in. So in order for the CPU heatsink to fit, see there's the mounting hole for the bracket, and there's only about 5/8 inch between there. I went ahead and see this little ring around here. I just chopped it off of this one, and I still might have to trim up that bottom of the GPU a little bit, but I don't think so. I'm gonna flatten this out a little bit more, make it like super clean, just a little sharp, and then see if we can squeeze it underneath that lip. So I glued in 3 of the standoffs. I used 5-minute epoxy this time instead of 15-minute. 15 was a little excessive. 5 minutes is plenty. So I got 3 of them epoxied in, pretty much all 3 corners. This one, and that one. I'm gonna pull out the graphics card and then loosen up these screws and pull out the motherboard. And then this screw right here is gonna get a little bit of epoxy. I'll place it back down and let that one dry. And then after that, I gotta figure out where I'm gonna put the standoffs for the CPU cooler. This one I'm gonna have to be careful with. There's a bump right there from the old location, and you can see the metal kind of sticking over there in the edge right there. I'm gonna have to drill it and put a new little standoff. Alright, I'm gonna pull this GPU and the motherboard, glue down that other standoff. Just kind of place the CPU heatsink in place where it's supposed to be, and even cutting off that little ring, it's just like that. So I'm gonna have to trim off a little bit of the plastic shield right here, but whatever. Looks like it's gonna fit though. So I think I have the CPU heatsink in the right place underneath, and I drilled at that hole over on this corner to have the standoff slide down into it, so it's nice and stable. Everything's in place. All the mounting holes are lined up. So all the standoffs for the motherboard are good. The GPU is lined up. The I/O is cut. Now I'm going to show you what I had to do to this little hole over here, because now I'm going to pull the whole motherboard back out, just lift it out, it's not mounted at all, and then put some epoxy on these 4 corners where these mounts go, and then I'll place it back down into the little puddles like I did here and just let it dry. And 15-20 minutes from now or whatever, I'll come back and I'll just loosen up the heatsink and lift it away, and the standoffs should stay in place where they are underneath. And then I'll go back and I'll add a little bit of epoxy around the edges that might not have been sealed all the way. Let me lift this out and show you what's going on here. It's kind of tight, but see how I have the standoffs already on. These 2 in the front are actually slipping into holes. That hole and that one, and these other 2 in the back are just going to be sitting on the metal right there, but they'll be epoxied down. Alright, I think I have all my standoffs mounted where I need them now, including the CPU cooler mounts. I just got those glued into place. This one's actually sitting in a little hole, and this one, that littler hole, is the original one. And then I drilled a hole right next to it in the metal. You can see the gap right there. And then allowed that standoff to slide down into it and put a little bit of epoxy on that edge so it wouldn't be enough to dry. Now I'm going to add a little bit of epoxy around this, and maybe even
drizzle some down inside that hole and try to sure up this mount, make sure it's nice and strong. And these ones, let's see if I can get it lower in there, aren't like this one. These ones are like solid cylinders. Well, not cylinders, but you know what I mean, a hex head cylinder. And these ones are actually like real standoffs with a thread. So they're kind of sticking up and they kind of like seem like they're a little weak or whatnot. So what I'm going to do is just take a couple washers and slide them over the top like this. And then I'm going to fill up the gap with some epoxy. You know what I mean? And fill in the gap over here. I don't know what I should do. Maybe make a little dam right here to hold some of the epoxy. I don't know. But it'll be strong when it's done. These ones are already like rock solid. They're not going anywhere. And then I'll clean up this stuff with a little sandpaper grinder, chip it off or something, and then sand it up a little bit and paint it, make it look a little bit better. But it appears I have all my standoffs ready to go. Whew, that was a pain in the freaking butt. I did not anticipate it being that much of a pain. Oh well. You never know until you start digging into it. But we'll get it done, for sure. It's looking good.